stupid. Their braincasts show complex cerebral folding, especially in areas associated with spatial memory. They had regular feeding routes, favorite trees, seasonal patterns. They remembered threats. One skeleton from Argentina shows a healed human spear wound. It survived the first encounter. Learned, adapted, but learning required survival, and humans were improving their graduation rate. The killing method was horrific in its efficiency. No single death blow. Ground sloth hide was too thick, bones too massive. Instead, dozens of small wounds, bleeding it out, following the weakening giant for hours, days maybe, waiting for blood loss and exhaustion to do what spears couldn't. We found one kill site in Brazil, says Dr. Luciano Vargas, who studies sloth-human interactions. 23 broken spear points around one skeleton. But the killing blow, a single puncture at the base of the skull. They waited until it collapsed. Then someone crawled under its head and drove a spear through the only soft spot. Imagine the courage that took. Or the desperation. Each ground sloth fed a band for weeks. 3,000 pounds of meat, hide for shelters, bones for tools, tendons for rope. One successful hunt could mean the difference between thriving and starvation, worth risking disembowelment. The sloths fought back. Quebrada Jaguar in Peru preserved a battlefield, human bones scattered among sloth remains. One human skull shows distinctive parallel gouges, claw marks. The spacing matches Megatherium exactly. Someone got too close, paid the price. But the most disturbing evidence comes from Mylodon Cave in Chile. The floor is covered in sloth dung, preserved by cold and dryness, layer after layer, representing thousands of years of occupation. Then, abruptly, human artifacts appear. The dung stops, not gradually, immediately, as if someone evicted the long-time tenants. The dung tells us something crucial, Vargas notes. Ground sloths were creatures of habit. Same caves, same routes, same trees. Predictable, and predictability, to human hunters, meant vulnerability. We didn't need to be stronger, we just needed to know where they'd be tomorrow. Native American oral histories describe the big hairy ones with remarkable accuracy. Creatures that walked upright like humans but towered over trees. Peaceful unless cornered. Would rear up and roar when threatened, a sound like thunder in a cave. The stories always end the same way. The hairy ones trusted too much, moved too slowly, and paid for it. One story from Patagonia is especially haunting. It describes hunters covering themselves in sloth dung to mask their scent, crawling into caves where sloths slept, killing them in darkness. Archaeological evidence supports this. Several cave sites show sloths killed while lying down, spear wounds in their backs, assassinated in their sleep. By 10,000 years ago, the giants were gone. Climate played a role. Their specialized gut bacteria couldn't adapt to rapid vegetation changes. But the timing is suspicious. Every region sloths disappeared from had just received its first humans, Australia's Diprotodon, South America's Megatherium, North America's Paramylodon. Different continents, different species, same story. People ask why we couldn't coexist, Vargas concludes. The answer is in those footprints. Ground sloths evolved to fight face to face. Intimidation displays, claw combat, strength contests. Humans attacked from behind, bled them out, turned their habits against them. We were playing different games. The last ground sloths died on Caribbean islands, 5,000 years after mainland extinction. Smaller, adapted to island life, they survived until humans reached them by boat. The final populations lived in Cuba and Hispaniola, browsing seaside vegetation, unaware their relatives were already fossils. When they went extinct, forests across the Americas changed. Trees that evolved with ground sloth pruning grew unchecked. Fruits that required giant sloth guts for germination stopped spreading. Entire ecosystems built around megafauna digestion collapsed. We killed the gardeners and wondered why the garden died. At White Sands, tourists now walk where giants made their last stand. Children put their feet inside fossilized prints, laughing at the size difference. They don't realize they're standing in a crime scene, the spot where human intelligence murdered sloth strength, where patience killed power. The ground sloths were right to spin in circles, slashing at shadows. The shadows had plans. 300,000 years ago, Chesem Cave, Israel. A human ancestor sits by a hearth, rotating a flint blade over controlled flames. Not cooking, engineering. The heat penetrates crystalline structures, reducing friction between planes. When it cracks, it will crack predictably. This isn't accidental discovery. It's materials science older than our species. They knew different stones require different temperatures, reveals Dr. Felipe Natalio, whose team uncovered the evidence. Some they heated to 300 degrees Celsius, others to 500 degrees Celsius. They were controlling fire with precision we associate with pottery kilns. This wasn't campfire. This was industrial process. Fire was humanity's first rebellion against nature's rules. Every other animal accepted darkness, cold, and raw meat as immutable facts. We decided facts were negotiable. The moment we controlled combustion, we started a war against reality we're still fighting. But mastery took millennia. Wonderwork Cave in South Africa preserves the struggle, layer after layer of ash, charcoal, and failure. Early fires that scorched everything, middle periods where they achieved control, later layers showing refined technique, specific woods for specific purposes, temperatures maintained within narrow ranges. Fire wasn't one discovery, explains Dr. Francesco Berner, who analyzed the Wonderwerk evidence. It was thousands of discoveries. Which wood burns hot versus long, how airflow affects temperature, where to position food for cooking versus drying. Each generation added knowledge. Fire mastery was crowdsourced across centuries. The first weapons were defensive. Fire circles that kept predators at comfortable distances. Smilodon might be perfectly evolved for throat crushing, but it couldn't evolve past fearing flames. For the first time, humans could sleep without someone watching, could gather without fear, could be weak and survive. Then we weaponized defense. FXJJ-20 in Kenya, 1.5 million years ago. Archaeologists find something disturbing. A kilometer-wide burn scar preserved in sediment. Not a natural wildfire, the ignition points form a line. Someone set the savannah ablaze deliberately. The bones tell why. Hundreds of animals trapped between flames and water, slaughtered en masse. This wasn't hunting, says Dr. Sarah Lubik, who studies ancient fire use. This was ecosystem weaponization. They turned landscape into a killing field. Every animal that ran from flames ran toward waiting spears, efficiency through apocalypse. By 300,000 years ago, fire was surgical. Homo heidelbergensis in Germany used resin extraction requiring exact temperatures. Too cool, no resin. Too hot, it burns. They created pitch for hafting weapons. Prehistoric superglue made from trees and precision. The chemistry required would challenge modern camping enthusiasts. But fire's greatest weapon was invisible: smoke. Denisova Cave preserves evidence of fumigation. Specific plants burned not for heat, but chemistry. Smoke that repelled insects, killed parasites, maybe even altered consciousness. The cave's famous Denisovan occupants weren't just living with fire. They were practicing chemical warfare against the microscopic world. Every hearth tells a story, Lubik notes. Some burn bone for fuel, a grease fire that burns longer than wood. Others show repeated use of medicinal plants. Some hearths were surrounded by worked stones, industrial areas where fire enabled tool production. They weren't just using fire, they were specializing it. Fire transformed social structures. Hearth-centered activities created the first authentic human gathering spaces. Cooking externalized digestion, reducing gut size and freeing calories for brain growth. The fireside became classroom, boardroom, and temple. Stories told by flames became humanity's first shared reality. But mastery came with cost. Herto, Ethiopia, 160,000 years ago. A child's skull showing signs of repeated burning. Not cooking, ritual. Fire became powerful enough to require magic. Sacred enough to demand sacrifice. The tool that freed us from nature's rules created new rules, cultural ones, arguably harder to break. Shell middens from Pinnacle Point, South Africa, 164,000 years ago, reveal industrial-scale cooking. Thousands of shells heated to precise temperatures that made extraction easier. An assembly line powered by controlled combustion. Mass production before agriculture. Fast food before civilization. The real revolution was psychological. Fire meant humans could transform materials, clay to pottery, ore to metal, sand to glass. But first, we had to imagine transformation was possible. Fire taught us that reality's rules had exceptions, that solid could become liquid, that toxic could become edible, that weak apes could become strong through chemistry. Every technology we've developed stems from fire mastery. Natalio concludes, engines burn fuel, computers use electricity, which we generate through combustion. Nuclear power is just very complicated fire. That moment 300,000 years ago, when someone realized fire was controllable, that was the moment we stopped being animals and started being alchemists. But perhaps fire's greatest gift was time. Time after sunset to plan tomorrow. Time to teach children complex skills. Time to create art, music, culture. Darkness had ruled half of every day since time began. Fire gave us those stolen hours, and in those hours we plotted the overthrow of nature itself. Other species adapted to the world as they found it. We found fire and decided the world needed adapting to us. The flames still burn in every engine, every power plant, every rocket pushing towards stars. The rebellion that started in Kesem Cave continues. We're still that ape by the fire, convinced that reality is negotiable. So far, we've been right. Grotte Mandrin, southern France. 54,000 years ago. A Homo sapiens craftsman holds what will become humanity's first guided missile. The bow is elegant, flexible yew backed with sinew, strung with twisted gut. The arrows are masterpieces. Micro-point tips weighing less than 3 grams, perfectly balanced, fletched with feathers. This isn't evolution. This is revolution. Finding these artifacts was like finding a laptop in a pyramid, admits Dr. Law Metz, whose team discovered the weapons. Neanderthals were still using thrusting spears. These humans brought death from 50 meters away. It's the technological equivalent of bringing guns to a knife fight. The mathematics of murder had changed overnight. A thrusting spear requires closing to contact range with prey that evolved to kill anything that close. Success rate? Maybe 10% against dangerous game. Survival rate for hunters? Questionable. Every Neanderthal skeleton shows rodeo rider trauma, broken bones from wrestling prey to death. Bow hunting, stand behind a tree, draw, release. Miss, try again from safety. Hit, track the bleeding animal until it collapses. Success rate 60%. Survival rate 95%. The bow didn't just change hunting, it changed the risk-reward calculation of being human. Neanderthals were the UFC fighters of human species, Metz explains. All muscle, close combat, taking hits to give hits. Sapiens were snipers. Why get punched when you can shoot from the parking lot? But the bow was more than distance. It was force multiplication. A 100-pound human drawing a 50-pound bow could deliver 200 pounds of impact force. Suddenly, children could be lethal hunters. Women could defend camps solo. Elderly craftsmen could contribute calories instead of consuming them. Demographics shifted overnight. The arrows tell the deeper story. Those 3-gram points required understanding of ballistics that wouldn't be formalized for 50,000 years. Too heavy, they drop short. Too light, they lack penetration. Wrong balance point, they tumble. The Mandarin points are perfect, aerodynamic, weighted for stability, designed for specific prey. These weren't generalist tools, notes Dr. Ludovic Slimak, site director. We found points for birds, others for rabbits, others clearly for larger game. Specialized ammunition, they were matching projectiles to targets like modern hunters select calibers. The manufacturing process required convergent technologies. Bowwood needed specific moisture content, seasoning time, and precision shaping. Strings demanded fiber processing, spinning, and tensile strength calculations. Arrows needed straight shafts, consistent diameter, and perfect spine flex. Fletching required understanding of spin stabilization, each component worthless alone, revolutionary together. Neanderthals saw this technology. We know because they tried copying it. Late Neanderthal sites show experimental points, attempts at composite tools, but copying complex technology isn't like copying stone flakes. Without the full technical package, bow, string, arrows, fletching, release technique, the pieces were useless. It's like showing someone a car when they've only known walking, Slimak analogizes. They might copy the wheels, but without understanding combustion, transmission, steering, it's just funny-shaped rocks. Neanderthals had 200,000 years of thrusting spear tradition. Hard to abandon what works for what might work. The social implications were seismic. Bow hunting could be taught to children on safe targets. No risk of being gored while learning. Skills transferred through practice, not near-death experience. A 10-year-old with a bow was more dangerous than a Neanderthal champion with a spear. Ambush hunting became assassination. Humans could hide 50 meters from water sources, picking off prey without revealing themselves. One archer could control an entire valley. 10 archers could depopulate a migration route. The landscape of death expanded from arm's reach to arrow's flight. But perhaps most revolutionary, the bow worked on humans. We don't find evidence of Neanderthal sapiens warfare, Metz carefully notes. But Neanderthals disappeared from regions right after bow technology arrived. Coincidence? Maybe. But if someone's shooting at you from distances you can't retaliate, do you fight or relocate? The bow created humanity's first arms race. Longer ranges demanded better materials. Better materials enabled faster arrows. Faster arrows required advanced fletching. By 20,000 years ago, arrow technology would shame modern carbon fiber attempts. We've found arrows that flew true for 100 meters, penetrating hide that stops bullets. Cave art changes after bow invention. Earlier art shows humans fleeing animals, hiding, cowering. Post-bow art shows humans dominating, animals pierced with multiple arrows. Hunters standing casually as prey dies at distance. The predator-prey relationship had inverted. We were no longer participants in nature's dance. We were choreographers. The bow was humanity's declaration of independence from ecological rules, Slimak concludes. Every other predator evolved within constraints: claw length, jaw strength, running speed. The bow said, we opt out. We would set our own constraints, define our own limits. Evolution by invention, not selection. At Grotte Mandren, archaeologists found something poignant: a child's bow, 30% smaller than adult versions. Perfect proportions, working string, blunt practice arrows. Someone spent weeks crafting a training weapon for a 6-year-old, teaching them that distance equals safety, that technology beats biology, that the world bends to those who bend the bow. 54,000 years later, we've traded bows for bullets, arrows for missiles. But the principle remains. Why engage when you can eliminate from safety? Why evolve when you can invent? The bow didn't just change hunting, it changed what it meant to be human. From participants to predators, from evolution's subjects to its masters. All because someone figured out that bent wood could store energy, and stored energy could be released on demand. Physics defeating physiology. Mind over muscle. The first shot fired in humanity's war against biological limitations. We're still firing. The Neanderthal child died confused. No predator wounds, no starvation, just fever that wouldn't break, lungs that wouldn't clear, and parents who could only watch. The year was 45,000 BCE, the place, Vindiger Cave, Croatia. The killer? A tropical disease that hitched a ride in Homo sapiens' blood, finding virgin immune systems in European natives. Neanderthals had never experienced African pathogens, explains Dr. Charlotte Holdcroft from Cambridge, who studies ancient disease transmission. Their immune systems were calibrated for European threats: cold-adapted bacteria, cave parasites, local viruses. When sapiens arrived carrying tropical diseases, it was smallpox meets Native Americans 40,000 years early. The evidence hides in Neanderthal DNA. Modern humans carry Neanderthal immune genes, but specifically ones dealing with European pathogens. The reverse isn't true. Neanderthals didn't acquire our tropical disease resistance. They died before they could adapt. Consider Helicobacter pylori, the stomach bacteria that causes ulcers. Genetic analysis shows it split into African and European strains 100,000 years ago. Neanderthals had the European strain. Sapiens brought the African variety. When the strains met in Neanderthal stomachs, the result was likely catastrophic gastritis, not immediately fatal, but weakening, and in the Pleistocene, weakness was death. Disease doesn't fossilize, Holdcroft notes, but population patterns do. We see Neanderthal sites abandoned right after sapiens contact, not conquered, just empty, like they fled something invisible. The invisible killers were legion. Tuberculosis, carried from Africa, thriving in close quarters cave living. Malaria, dormant in sapiens' blood, activating in new hosts. Tapeworms evolved for our guts, finding new homes. Each migrant brought a microscopic army their immune systems had learned to tolerate. But the cruelest killer, love. Denisova Cave revealed Denny, the 90,000-year-old girl with a Neanderthal mother and Denisovan father. Proof that human species weren't just meeting, they were mating. Every hybrid child was a disease vector, carrying pathogens between previously isolated populations. Sexually transmitted diseases were probably devastating, Holdcroft explains. HPV, herpes, diseases that transmit through intimacy. Neanderthal groups were small, isolated. One infected individual could destroy an entire bloodline through normal mating patterns. The Shanidar Cave Neanderthals tell stories of care and catastrophe. Shanidar 1 survived multiple injuries that should have killed him, evidence of medical knowledge and social support. But Shanidar 4, the famous flower burial, shows signs of chronic respiratory infection. They buried him with medicinal plants. It didn't help. Sapiens had advantages beyond immunity. Our larger social networks meant disease outbreaks burned through populations but left survivors. Neanderthal groups of 10 to 20 individuals. One bad outbreak meant extinction. No herd immunity, no recovery population, just empty caves and orphaned tools. We model disease spread in small populations, says Dr. Gerd Müller from Vienna. Below 50 individuals, one novel pathogen can cause complete collapse. Neanderthals lived below that threshold. Every new disease was potentially apocalyptic. The exchange wasn't one-sided. Sapiens acquired Neanderthal diseases too. We carry genetic evidence of ancient viral insertions from our cousins, but our populations were larger, more connected. What killed them immunized us. Their tragedy became our antibodies. Cave sediments tell the tale. Neanderthal occupation layers show steady accumulation, centuries of continuous habitation. Then sapiens artifacts appear nearby. Within archaeological moments, Neanderthal layers stop. Not gradually, abruptly, like someone turned off a switch. People imagine warfare, genocide, Müller reflects. But the evidence suggests something quieter. Neanderthals vanishing from landscapes they'd owned for millennia, fleeing an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't understand. The last Neanderthals retreated to Gibraltar, the Iberian Peninsula's southern tip, isolated, nowhere left to run. Their final sites show dietary stress, repeated infections, population collapse. They died looking at Africa, where their invisible killers originated. Modern humans carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, mostly immune genes. We're walking memorials to the diseases that killed them. Every flu we survive, every infection we fight, we use antibodies borrowed from the dead. Their extinction became our evolution. Disease shaped human history more than any war. Holdcroft concludes, when sapiens met Neanderthals, Denisovans, others, we didn't need superior weapons. We carried weapons they couldn't see. Microscopic munitions evolved in African rainforests, deployed in European caves. The Vindiger child's parents couldn't know their daughter died from interspecies contact, couldn't know her fever came from neighbors, not nature. They probably blamed themselves, tried every remedy, prayed to whatever Neanderthals found sacred. Modern parents recognize those feelings, the helplessness of watching children suffer from invisible threats, the desperate search for cures. The difference? We have antibiotics, vaccines, treatments, built on immune systems strengthened by surviving what killed our cousins. Every medicine cabinet is a monument to extinct humans whose deaths taught our ancestors' bodies to fight. We didn't murder other human species, we infected them, and then we inherited their immune lessons, written in DNA. The Invisible War ended 40,000 years ago. We won by surviving what killed everyone else. The victory conditions, written in antibodies. The prize? A planet cleaned of competition by creatures too small to see. 300,000 years ago, Earth's thermostat broke. Not broken like needs repair. Broken like violently swinging between ice age and tropical paradise every few thousand years. Marine isotope stage 9 was climate chaos incarnate, and every human species was along for the ride. Imagine New York having Bangkok's climate, then Greenland's, then back to Bangkok's within a single lifetime, describes Dr. Peter Clark from Oregon State. Sea levels yo-yoing 20 meters, forests becoming tundra, becoming forests. We think climate change is unprecedented. Our ancestors lived it on fast forward. The Greenland ice cores tell the story in frozen detail, temperatures swinging 10 degrees Celsius in decades. Methane levels revealing tropical wetlands where permafrost exists today. Dust layers showing Sahara-sized deserts where Amazon-like rainforests had thrived. Earth wasn't gradually changing, it was having seizures. For Homo heidelbergensis in Europe, this meant their reliable hunting grounds transformed unpredictably. One generation's mammoth steppe became the next generation's deciduous forest. Prey species appeared and vanished like seasonal decorations. Imagine planning survival when your ecosystem had ADH. Heidelbergensis sites show frantic adaptation, notes Dr. Katharina Havati from Tübingen. Tool types changing rapidly, diet shifting from megafauna to rabbits to shellfish. They were evolutionary jazz musicians improvising survival in real time. Neanderthals responded by becoming climate specialists. Their bodies, short, muscular, with large noses for warming air, were built for cold. When Europe froze, they thrived. When it warmed, they retreated to mountain refugia, waiting for winter's return. Climate refugees before climate was political, but Denisovans played three-dimensional climate chess. Genetic evidence shows they occupied environments from Arctic Siberia to tropical Wallace. Same species, radically different adaptations. Their DNA gifted Tibetans high-altitude genes and Melanesians tropical disease resistance. They weren't adapting to climate. They were collecting adaptations like Pokemon cards. Denisovans broke the rules, Havati admits. One species shouldn't span such ecological diversity. It's like finding polar bears in the Amazon. Except it worked for 200,000 years. Then there's Homo sapiens. We emerged during peak climate chaos in Africa where the swings were wildest. East Africa's lakes filled and emptied like broken bathtubs. The Sahara greened and died repeatedly. Our birthplace was climate's ground zero. Sapiens evolved weird because of climate instability, explains Dr. Rick Potts from the Smithsonian. Big brains, yes, but also incredible behavioral flexibility. We didn't adapt to any specific environment. We adapted to adaptation itself. The evidence is our physiology. Sweating, rare in mammals, let us hunt during heat that immobilized prey. Subcutaneous fat distribution allowed both insulation and cooling. Our metabolism could switch from carbs to fats to proteins without specialized guts. We were the Swiss Army knives of human species. Lake Malawi's sediment cores reveal the cost. Mega droughts lasting centuries. Population bottlenecks where humanity nearly went extinct. One genetic study suggests all humans descend from maybe 10,000 individuals who survived a catastrophic drought 70,000 years ago. We're all cousins of catastrophe survivors. Climate selected for culture, Potts emphasizes. Physical adaptations take generations. Cultural adaptations take conversations. When climate changed faster than genes could follow, only species that could change behavior survived. The archaeological record shows this cultural acceleration. 300,000 years ago, basic tools, occasional fire. 200,000 years ago, diverse toolkits, consistent hearths. 100,000 years ago, jewelry, art, complex hafting. 50,000 years ago, bows, sewn clothing, watercraft. Each climate swing forced innovation or death. But perhaps climate's cruelest joke was making everywhere uninhabitable sometimes. Europe's perfect hunting grounds became barren ice. Africa's lush lakes became salt flats. Asia's steppes became flooded plains. No place was permanently safe. Movement became mandatory. Other human species picked territories and optimized, notes Dr. Jessica Thompson from Yale. Neanderthals perfected Europe, Erectus mastered Asia, but sapiens, we perfected leaving. Our superpower wasn't adapting to place, but abandoning places. The last climate laugh came 40,000 years ago. A brief warm spell, the Campanian Ignimbrite super-eruption triggered volcanic winter. Temperatures crashed globally. Neanderthals, already stressed, couldn't adapt fast enough. Denisovans vanished from the record. Only hypermobile sapiens survived by running to wherever was least catastrophic. Modern humans complain about seasonal allergies and need 3 weather apps to plan weekends. Our ancestors navigated climate change that would break computer models. They didn't have meteorology. They had memory, mobility, and the ability to change everything when everything changed. We won the human race because we refused to pick a lane, Thompson concludes. Every other species specialized for specific climates. We specialized in having no specialization, champions of inconsistency in an inconsistent world. 300,000 years later, we've temporarily stabilized climate with technology. Air conditioning, heating, irrigation. We've paused the roller coaster our ancestors rode for millennia. But the pause is artificial. The climate's nature hasn't changed. Only our ability to ignore it has. When that ability fails, and physics suggests it will, we'll rediscover what our ancestors knew. Climate isn't scenery, it's the director. And it's been planning plot twists for 300,000 years. We're just the latest characters convinced we've figured out the script. Our ancestors would laugh if they weren't extinct from being wrong about weather. Close your eyes. You're standing on land that no longer exists. Beneath your feet, 900 feet of Pacific Ocean will one day flow. But 30,000 years ago, you're in the center of Beringia, a continent twice the size of Texas, connecting Asia to Alaska, and something is coming. The ground trembles. Not an earthquake. Footsteps. 10,000 woolly mammoths moving like a living mountain range, their tusks catching morning light, breath steaming in synchronized clouds. Behind them, following the rivers of meat, come the predators. And behind the predators, almost invisible in their patience, come the humans. Beringia wasn't a bridge, insists Dr. John Hoffiker from the University of Colorado. It was a homeland. People lived there for 15,000 years. Generations were born, lived full lives, and died without ever seeing either continent's edge. The numbers stagger belief. At its peak, Beringia stretched 1,000 miles north to south. Not an ice corridor, but a vast grassland, the most productive ecosystem Earth has ever known. 1 square mile supported more large animals than an entire modern national park. Mammoth, bison, horse, camel, lion, bear. A parade of giants following an endless summer of grass. Recent DNA from a 31,000-year-old milktooth found in Siberia reveals the human story. A population split from East Asians isolated in Beringia, developing unique genetic markers. For 15,000 years, these ancient Beringians lived in their lost world while ice walls blocked them from the Americas. The climate data shows why they stayed. While Europe froze under mile-high glaciers, Beringia remained oddly mild. Ocean currents and geographic positioning created a refugium, a pocket of survival in a dying world. Summer temperatures reached 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Rivers teemed with salmon, berries carpeted southern slopes. But it was the megafauna that made Beringia legendary. Nowhere else on Earth have we found such bone density. At some sites, you can't dig without hitting mammoth tusks. The bones stack like geological layers, death piled upon death, preserved in permafrost, waiting to tell their story. Then, 14,000 years ago, the ice walls melted. The ancient Beringians faced a choice: follow the megafauna south into an unknown continent or retreat into Asia. The archaeological record suggests they split. Some went south, becoming the ancestors of Native Americans. Others returned to Siberia, their DNA surviving in scattered populations. But Beringia itself was doomed. As glaciers melted, sea levels rose 400 feet. The mammoth steppe drowned meter by meter. The last mammoths retreated to shrinking islands. The last humans paddled away in skin boats, watching their homeland disappear beneath grey waves. Today, Bering Strait fishermen still pull up mammoth teeth in their nets, tusks black with age, polished by current. Messages from a drowned continent remind us that entire worlds can vanish, taking their giants with them. When we dream of lost Atlantis, Hoffaker notes, we're dreaming of Beringia. It's the only real continent that sank beneath the waves, taking an entire ecosystem to the abyss. The mammoths knew. That's why they kept walking south. They were running from the rising sea. White Sands, New Mexico, 2021. David Bustos kneels in the dried lakebed, his hand trembling over an impossibility, a human footprint, perfect as if made yesterday. Except yesterday was 23,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, when mile-high ice sheets supposedly made human migration impossible. The footprint belongs to a teenager, walking at 3.8 miles per hour, carrying a toddler on their hip. You can see where they shifted the child's weight, where they stopped to rest, where the toddler was put down and picked up again. A moment of parenting frozen in stone that shatters everything we thought we knew. This changes the entire story of human arrival in the Americas, whispers Dr. Matthew Bennett, staring at tracks that shouldn't exist. These people were here during the worst of the Ice Age, living alongside creatures we thought they never met. The trackway tells a thriller. Human prints cross mammoth tracks. A giant ground sloth's prints overlap the human trail, then veer sharply. It caught the human scent. Most shocking, the humans were barefoot. In an environment where one mistake meant death, they walked unprotected among giants. But White Sands is just the latest bombshell. In San Diego, the Cerruti Mastodon site dates to 130,000 years ago. Archaeologist Tom Demere points to spiral fractures on mastodon bones, breaks that only happen on fresh bone. Beside them, cobblestones showing percussion marks. Someone was here, smashing bones for marrow, when Neanderthals still ruled Europe. The establishment erupted. Impossible, contamination, misinterpretation. But 3 different dating methods confirmed the age. The stones came from 30 kilometers away. The wear patterns match experimental replication. If it's not human activity, nobody can explain what it is. In Mexico's Chiquihuit Cave, 2,000 stone artifacts date back 33,000 years. In Brazil's Serra da Capivara, painted cave art might be 50,000 years old. Each discovery pushes human arrival deeper into impossible time. We've been looking in the wrong places, admits archaeologist Cyprian Ardelin. We assumed humans walked here. What if they sailed? The coastal migration theory is gaining momentum. Sea levels were 400 feet lower. A chain of islands dotted the Pacific coast. Kelp forests created a marine highway rich in seals, fish, and shellfish. You could boat from Japan to Chile without losing sight of land. But if humans were here 100,000 plus years ago, where are the bodies, the tools, the DNA? The answer might be underwater. Rising seas drowned the coastal routes these ancient mariners would have followed. Their camps, their bones, their entire story lies beneath 400 feet of Pacific Ocean. Native American oral histories suddenly seem less mythical. The Tlingit speak of escaping floods that came up to the mountains. The Haida describe ice walls reaching to the sky. The Yokuts tell of ancestors arriving when the world was different. Indigenous peoples have been telling us they've always been here, notes archaeologist Paulette Steeves. Maybe it's time we listened. The White Sands teenager didn't know they were making history. They were just carrying a child through dangerous territory, probably gathering food, probably scared. Their footprints accidentally created evidence that would, 23,000 years later, rewrite textbooks. One small step for a prehistoric parent. One giant leap for American archaeology. The subway worker's headlamp catches something white in the tunnel wall. Bone. Massive bone. 1991, beneath Dykeman Street. They've just uncovered Manhattan's deepest secret. A mastodon tusk gleaming like buried ivory in the exact spot where the A train now rumbles. Welcome to Ice Age New York, where your morning commute crosses ancient killing grounds. Picture Broadway 20,000 years ago, where taxis now honk, mastodons trumpeted, 11 feet tall, 10,000 pounds, defending calves from dire wolf packs. The Harlem River, a glacial meltwater torrent where giant beavers built dams you could walk across. Central Park, a spruce forest where 12-foot-tall ground sloths stripped bark with claws like scythes. Manhattan was megafauna central, explains Dr. Sidney Horenstein, urban geologist. The variety of species here rivaled Africa's Serengeti, just bigger. Everything was bigger. The evidence hides beneath skyscrapers. In 1858, workers digging the Harlem Canal hit a complete mastodon skeleton. 1925, Inwood apartment construction uncovered another. The Cohoes mastodon, found near Albany, stood 10 feet tall with tusks like curved telephone poles. Carbon dating, 13,000 years old. Cause of death, humans. But mastodons were the gentle giants. The real monsters? Cave bears denning where Wall Street now trades. Saber-toothed cats ambushing prey where Times Square now glitters. And the giant short-faced bear, 1,500 pounds of muscle and rage, fast as a horse, tall as your ceiling. One fossil found in Dutchess County shows claw marks 15 feet up a tree. It wasn't climbing, it was reaching. The American lion ruled this concrete jungle before concrete existed. Panthera atrox, 25% larger than African lions, hunting in coordinated prides. Their roars echoed off the Palisades. They cached kills in caves beneath modern Manhattan, their tooth marks still visible on 20,000-year-old bones. Every New York construction project is a dice roll, notes paleontologist Carl Mailing. We might find a subway tunnel or a saber-tooth den. Usually it's both. The Hudson River told time in corpses. Spring floods washed mammoth carcasses downstream, creating bone jams where predators gathered. One site near Yonkers contained remains of 17 different megafauna species in a single layer. A snapshot of death from when New York City was wilder than any Hollywood movie. Then came the humans. Clovis Point's distinctive spearheads appear New York strata 13,000 years ago. Within 1,000 years, the megafauna vanished. Coincidence? The timing suggests otherwise. These first New Yorkers were armed, organized, and hungry. But they faced competition. Dire wolves hunted in packs of 30, using relay tactics to exhaust mammoth herds. Short-faced bears claimed entire territories, marking boundaries with claw marks still visible on surviving rock faces. The first human New Yorkers weren't colonizing empty land. They were invading occupied territory. One human skull fragment from Pelham Bay shows healing from massive trauma, likely a glancing blow from a cave bear. They survived somehow. Early New Yorkers were as tough as their modern descendants claim to be. When you walk Manhattan streets, Mailing muses, you're following mammoth trails. They carved the easiest routes through glacial terrain. Broadway follows an ancient game trail. So does the Boston Post Road. We still use their commute. The city that never sleeps was built on the bones of giants who slept forever. Every skyscraper stands on their graves. Denisova Cave, Siberia, 2018. The bone fragment is tiny, smaller than a penny. But when geneticist Vivian Slon sees the DNA results, she checks them 3 times, then calls her supervisor, then sits in stunned silence. The bone belongs to a teenage girl who died 90,000 years ago. Her mother was Neanderthal. Her father was Denisovan. She is Denny, the only first-generation hybrid ever found. Proof that different human species didn't just meet, they fell in love. The odds of finding this individual were astronomical, Slon explains, still amazed. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, then discovering the needle is made of gold. But Denny was just the beginning. December 2024 brought revolutionary discoveries that rewrote the entire interbreeding timeline. New analysis of ancient genomes pinpointed the Neanderthal Homo sapiens mixing to exactly 47,000 years ago, lasting 7,000 years. Not brief encounters, but sustained relationships across millennia. Picture the scene. A Neanderthal woman in prehistoric Croatia meets a Homo sapiens man. He's taller, slimmer, with a strange rounded skull. She's shorter, stronger, with a body built for Ice Age survival. They don't share a language. Their cultures are alien. Yet something sparks. 9 months later, a child is born carrying both lineages. That child's descendants include everyone reading this whose ancestors left Africa. Every non-African alive today carries the genetic signature of these ancient love affairs, reveals population geneticist Fernando Rachimo. We're all products of prehistoric romance. The evidence shows this wasn't rare. In the Oase cave in Romania, a 40,000-year-old human had a Neanderthal great-great-grandparent. At Sunghir in Russia, individuals show Neanderthal ancestry from just 2 to 4 generations back. These species weren't just coexisting, they were dating. But love came with a price. Hybrid males were likely sterile, a biological barrier that prevented full species merger. Only female hybrids could pass on combined genes, creating a one-way genetic flow that we still carry. Some Neanderthal DNA helped us. Immune system variants that fight disease, genes for fat metabolism that aided survival. Other variants brought problems, increased risk of depression, addiction, blood clotting disorders. It's the ultimate star-crossed lover's tale, muses archaeologist Juan Zillion. Different species meeting at the edge of extinction, creating children who carried both legacies forward. The archaeological record hints at the social dynamics. At some sites we find Neanderthal tools alongside sapiens jewelry, technology exchange, cultural mixing, perhaps gift-giving between lovers. At Grotte du Renne in France, Neanderthals suddenly started making jewelry, right after modern humans arrived nearby. Coincidence? Or someone trying to impress a date? The last Neanderthals show the highest genetic diversity, suggesting increased interbreeding as their populations shrank. Desperate times, desperate measures. Or perhaps barriers broke down when survival mattered more than differences. One poignant detail: Neanderthal women left more genetic legacy than Neanderthal men. The pattern suggests sapiens males with Neanderthal females was more common than the reverse. Whether by choice, force, or cultural exchange, the story written in our genes is complex. We used to think Neanderthals were primitive brutes, Zillow reflects, but someone loved them. Someone chose them as partners, raised hybrid children, mourned their deaths. That's not conquest. That's connection. Today, billions carry the proof of ancient affection in every cell. When you fight off a cold using Neanderthal immune variants, you're benefiting from a love story 47,000 years old. Species barriers meant nothing to hearts that recognized kindred spirits across evolutionary divides. Love found a way. Love always does. Dr. Sarah Chen stares at her computer screen, watching artificial intelligence analyze 300,000-year-old stone tools. The AI has just identified something no human archaeologist noticed in 40 years of study. A manufacturing pattern, a signature, These ancient tools weren't random, they were branded. The AI detected individual toolmaker styles, Chen explains, excitement breaking through scientific calm, like handwriting analysis, but for rocks. We can now identify specific Neanderthal artisans who lived 200,000 years ago. Welcome to archaeology's AI revolution, where machine learning reads ancient minds through their tools. The breakthrough came when researchers fed neural networks thousands of stone tool images. The AI learned to recognize patterns invisible to human eyes, micro decisions in flaking sequences, preferred angles, personal quirks preserved in stone. Suddenly, anonymous artifacts became individual stories. At Hominins, Germany, AI analysis of those 300,000-year-old wooden spears revealed sophisticated engineering. The wood grain was deliberately oriented for maximum strength. Weight distribution matched modern javelins. The makers understood physics they couldn't write equations for. These weren't instinctive creations, notes cognitive archaeologist Dr. Marcus Webb. They show theory of mind, understanding how objects behave in flight. That requires abstract thinking we didn't think existed 300,000 years ago. Even more stunning, AI detected teaching signatures. At multiple sites, tools show a progression from clumsy apprentice work to master craftsmanship, but with consistent quirks suggesting the same teacher. We can now track ancient master-apprentice relationships across decades. The Levallois technique, that revolutionary planned toolmaking, shows regional schools. AI identifies distinct French, German, and Middle Eastern styles, suggesting cultural transmission networks spanning continents. Ideas spreading at walking speed, but spreading nonetheless. At Kesem Cave in Israel, AI analysis revealed something bizarre. Tools from 300,000 years ago show design evolution, each generation slightly improving on the last. Not random variation, but directed improvement. The toolmakers were running experimental programs, testing innovations, keeping what worked. They were engineers, Webb insists. Prehistoric engineers running R&D programs that lasted centuries. The AI even detected tool ethics. At some sites, perfectly functional tools were discarded unused. Why? The AI found microfractures suggesting the stone's quality didn't meet standards. Ancient quality control. Pride in craftsmanship when survival was uncertain. Brain scan studies of modern nappers, people who recreate ancient tools, show intense activation in language areas. The same neural networks used for grammar apparently govern tool construction. This suggests toolmaking and language evolved together, each driving the other toward complexity. Every strike required syntax, explains neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman. Subject, hammerstone, acts on object, core, to produce result, flake. That's grammar in stone. The implications stagger. If 300,000-year-old tools show this complexity, their makers had modern-level cognitive abilities. They thought abstractly, planned hierarchically, taught systematically. They just couldn't write it down. One Neanderthal site in France shows tool styles suddenly changing 45,000 years ago, right when modern humans arrived. But the AI detected something surprising. Neanderthals weren't copying sapiens tools. They were innovating in response, creating new designs that outperformed both traditional styles. Competition drove creativity, Chen notes. The presence of modern humans triggered a Neanderthal renaissance. They didn't just adapt, they innovated. The AI revolution shows our ancestors' minds were never primitive. They were brilliant engineers trapped in a world without metal, brilliant teachers without writing, brilliant thinkers without words to capture their thoughts. Their tools weren't just rocks, they were crystallized intelligence, fossilized thoughts, ancient minds reaching across 300,000 years to touch ours. And AI is finally letting us touch back. Madagascar 2,000 years ago. A child points at the forest edge, screaming, "The ground is moving." No, something on the ground is moving. Something impossible. A bird, tall as 3 men stacked, striding on legs like tree trunks. The elephant bird, 10 feet tall, 1,000 pounds.